Welcome to the Life of Hair. My name's James Atkinson. Thank you for choosing to join into this week's episode. Now, in this week's episode, we're going to look at something that I don't get the opportunity to do all that much. There was a time when I did lots more very dark hair colours, and especially lifting very dark hair colours. As you probably know, can be extremely challenging, and you can come across all sorts of problems. Now, that's not to be said it can't be done and you can't get really light results on really dark hair types, but we just need to first of all think about some of the reasons why it's more challenging than lifting lighter hair types. Now, some of you will already be enlightened, and I'm not going to go into too much detail in this intro about why, but we'll talk a little bit more about it in the application process you're about to watch. But I think when we are talking about doing balayage-esque lived in blonde techniques onto very dark hair types, we are needing to use those traditional foiling techniques that we learned way back in college, the techniques that have become a bygone thing. With the advent of so many balayage techniques out there, so many people have not necessarily been using these highlighting techniques as much as they once were. And I think that is a bit of a shame, really, because I like a good old-fashioned highlight. In fact, I still do loads and loads of highlights in the salon, and I think if you want to create really beautiful blonde effects on very dark hair, balayage techniques are not the way to go. So the way I always think about it is if you're lifting more than 3 levels lighter, you probably want to be using some kind of foiling technique, then some kind of root shadow technique to create the look that you're after. This is just the way of physics and creating better saturation with foil. If you enjoyed this episode, hit thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and you're new here, and let me know down in the comments section what is your favorite technique for getting really dark hair types to those beautiful lived in blonde techniques. And if you'd like to know any more about the Life of Hair education, I have my own Patreon, which is linked in the description down below, where we do live episodes that are exclusive to the Patreons, taking a deeper look into the techniques that I use on a day-to-day basis. And until next time, guys, do look after yourselves, and I'll see you again for another episode of the Life of Hair very, very soon. Okay, so this is our starting point, a very, very dark level 3, actually Asian hair in this particular instance, going into some very grown out baby lights that have become extremely warm. And the idea today is to take out some of the warmth through the ends, lift up the root color, the root area that you're seeing here, those sort of 7 or 8 inches of very, very dark, almost black hair, and turn it to a beautiful shade of blonde. Now, one of the things that we obviously face is the darker the hair, the more pigment, the more difficult it is to lift. So that is the big problem, obviously, with lightning dark hair. We've got a long way to take it. You know, we're using product here that lifts a maximum of 8 levels, and we're at 3, and we want to get it all the way up to 10. So we're looking for almost peak performance out of the product. And so how do we get peak performance out of the product? Well, the way that we do that is that we make sure that we saturate. And the best way to saturate the hair is to make sure that your sections are nice and fine and you're getting tons and tons of product into the foil. So it's really, really important to remember, guys. Do not skimp on the product. Just pile it in there because it will pay you later to do that. You'll get better, cleaner results faster. And I know that some people obviously don't like to do that because it seems like it's going to cost you more to do the job, but then factor that into your costings. Don't just do the job and you run at not such a profitable service because you're taking on a different type of job. My dad was a builder, and when he would quote for a job, he would quote for all the materials and the customer would pay for all of the materials. So if you do that with your clients and you didn't use the amount of bleach that you thought you were going to, it's okay, because that is just part of the costing process. So don't forget, guys, I know we're like lovely people, hairdressers. We tend to like not necessarily want to put ourselves or overcharge the clients, but we're not overcharging them. We just didn't necessarily use the amount of products that we legislated for. Now, quickly, I want to talk about what I'm doing on the screen now. Now, the ends, as you remembered, were warmer. And on some of the ends, the pieces where I feel like I can get away with lifting them, I'm using blue powder bleach and 1.8% volume. And I'm folding my 4x3. I'm folding that 1.8 back on itself. And then I'm overlaying the 20 volume that I'm using in the foil to get the lift. So I'm using 20 volume and Olaplex in this particular video, blue powder bleach. It's just a fantastic little trick to prevent you going straight into the 20 volume that's on the roots. I mean, I want to lighten some of these ends, but I don't want to put 20 volume on them because obviously it's not going to do them any good to put 20 volume on. I know what some people are going to think where you're laying it on the 20 volume, but the 1.8% does create obviously a barrier between that and the 20 volume, and you probably come out about, I don't know, 4%. So it's not as strong as 20 volume, but it's not 6% either. And I know I've flipped between percentages and volumes in that particular sentence backwards and forwards, but that's how my mind thinks about colour. I don't specifically work it out with 1 vol or 1%. I kind of flip between the two. So with the technique that I've used here, I've taken a simple hot cross bond section and I've worked my way up the 2 quadrants on the left and right side simultaneously, going back and forth to each side, putting the foils in so that I get an even and consistent lift throughout the technique. Now, as I've come up to the highest point in the head, or in the crown area here, I'm still in a diagonal, but in a second, in that little triangular section that you're seeing right at the high point in the head, I'm going to be just going straight in with horizontal sections and working up to that high point. Now, I think for me, that is just one of those things that don't always work like that. Sometimes I just work diagonally through that little diamond-shaped section, but it also depends how much coverage I want to get out of that particular area on the head. In this particular instance, I'm wanting to get maximum coverage in that particular area, and so therefore horizontal sections always add more coverage. That was a particular area that the client had mentioned that in previous sessions had looked a bit dark, and so therefore I wanted to use that particular technique to kind of get a bit more color into that area. And because each then subsequent section will fall on top of the previous section because of the nature of the way you've put the foils in and the way that the hair is falling in this particular area, making it seem like you've got more foils in that area than you probably have. But don't forget, guys, I know in the comment section I see a lot of the time, do I always use horizontal sections? No, I don't. But I use horizontal sections when I want to get maximum color impact. Horizontal sections are the way forward. Diagonals create more softness and vertical sections create more dimension and separation. Hence, when we do a balayage technique, we tend to be using vertical sections. The main reason we don't use vertical sections to implement the balayage-esque techniques when we're using foil is because the definition would be too fine and it would be lost within the hair. Plus, I'm going to put a root stretch on this and it's going to change the dynamics of it completely anyway. So as you can see now, I've worked up to that high point in the head using these horizontal sections, and I'm really kind of maximizing my use of foil here to get the best result for the job. Key things to remember here are fine weaves and maximum saturation. Never underestimate these jobs. When you are quoting for these jobs, do tell the client that it's very difficult to lift hair this light, even if they've had it done easily in the past. You are just making them aware, because not all hairdressers tell the job as it is. They make out like it's an easy job, like it's a straightforward thing to do, and actually in reality they're actually taking the hair to the brink of death in reality, because we are lifting the hair as far as pretty much we can humanly take it. So we do need to tell them about that. It is only professional to let them know. So in this particular instance, we're just using those very fine stitches again. We're working up our side sections, starting off horizontally, and my sections are starting to slowly pivot towards the crown area. I will be working in a slight diagonal when I come up to the corner of this section just to create added softness once I get to the parietal ridge, the ridge that is just above the ear on the side of the head. When we are thinking about these techniques and foil placement, obviously I do want to get maximum coverage, but softness is also a thing. So you'll note in the top sections I will be using a more of a diagonal section, a herringbone if you will, in the top two sections to give me added softness in the areas where it really counts. But because I will be using a diagonal section, I will definitely need to put more foils in to get the same impact as I would if I used horizontal sections. So definitely bear that in mind, guys. It is really important when we're doing these techniques that we utilize the right angle for the job. You'll end up with a diagonal as you come up towards the top of the section. But the same rules are going to apply, and I'm going to say this a few times in this video, just so you remember: saturate, saturate, saturate. Get as much product into the foil as you can, and don't be afraid to paint up to the lip of the foil, especially if you use the technique of which I use, where the flap is underneath and we can push that flap back in towards the root area. A very useful thing to be able to do indeed. On this section, heavy saturation, folded my ends up. You can see underneath that I didn't have very good saturation because the back side of that section, even though I'd painted product onto it, still didn't have the color saturation that I needed. So lifting that section will also help you to get more product on the underneath side of the section, even though the sections are micro fine. Just making sure that you've got even saturation, guys, is so massively important. I cannot tell you enough. So we're working on the front section now. We're taking a very fine weave off the front of this section, and what we're going to do is have a kind of slightly more, not a money piece as such, but a little bit more color around the face in this particular instance. And I'm just doing a few foils with very small gaps in between, 2 or 3 millimeters maximum in between each of these first 3 sections. I do exactly the same thing on the opposite side, which you'll see a couple of foils of in just a minute's time. But it's a really superb way of just giving that little bit of extra pop around the face without kind of going down the full-blown money piece technique, especially with a money piece, as well as you need some kind of contrast and definition behind the section to really make sure that that money piece stands out. Too many falls behind the money piece and the money piece gets lost. So that really kind of hopefully helps you understand that with the money piece technique, dimension is absolutely paramount, and that's why they generally work best on more softer lived-in techniques. We could have turned this into definitely more of that kind of technique with the toning phase of this colour, but we chose not to because we wanted it to be kind of really diffused at the root all the way through, but with a little bit more blondness around the front. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am using diagonal sections in this top area, and I do that on both sides, and that is for added softness, but it's going to take a little bit more time because I'm going to need to put a few more foils in to get exactly the same amount of coverage as I did on the previous sections. You'll notice that I'm not necessarily painting any of the sections with the lower volume in this top section because the ends are very light and I'm worried about the condition generally. We've switched over to the opposite side now, and we're doing exactly the same thing as we did on the previous side. I'm just showing you the first couple of foils here just so you can see. But in reality, when we're doing a technique like this and we're saying to ourselves, okay, what are the most important factors? Fine sections, diagonals in the areas where it really counts, and making sure that we do what? Write it in the comment section down below. I'm not going to say it again. I've said it enough in this particular episode, but it's the king of the result. It's how we're going to get that maximum performance out of the lightener. When we're looking at doing techniques like this, we do need to also make sure that we allow ourselves enough time, guys. Time is king in this particular instance. As we've done our herringbone technique, again, we'll be left with a small triangle section at the crown area. I've just simply taken that triangle section, split it into 2, taken a fine weave out of that triangle section, and saturated it as much as I humanly could. And I said I wouldn't say it again, but I have said it again because it is so massively important. Now, this particular application took more than 2 hours to do. So, I mean, I don't think I'm the world's fastest foiler, nor do I think I'm the world's slowest foiler. A normal half head of highlights would take me around 45 minutes to apply. If I'm putting foils in for 2 hours, there's either one of two things going. I'm painting a lot of hair within each foil, or I'm putting a lot of foils in. And in this particular instance, I'm painting a lot of hair within each foil. How I'd have allowed myself a normal full head time, I'd have been running behind and my clients would be waiting and I would have been stressed. But I knew that it was going to take a long time, so I allocated the time for the job and I charged accordingly. Because that's the reality, guys. We need to be sure that we are giving ourselves ample time to make these techniques happen. You'll see me just taking out the foils. That's really important because obviously we want to take the foils out when they're ready so they don't over process, and rinse those foils as and when. You then see the product off the hair entirely, and then I did a root stretching technique, which I've got loads of videos on if you're going to go and see how I did that. And then this is the finished result, a beautiful blonde seamless lived-in technique. I mean, I keep talking about lived-in blondes at the moment. People will probably say this is just a set of highlights, James, but you know, lived-in blondes are created by the techniques. The root area is dropped down to a 9. It's blended into a 9/10 through the ends with a violet gold shade 10 VG, and it has come out absolutely knockout in my opinion. I absolutely love those violet gold tones. They create that beautiful kind of beachy blonde color, and I am absolutely always, actually didn't realize it for a long time, prefer that kind of additive of gold into those cooler shades, and how that really amplifies those much cooler shades that we have seen. And they do make those cooler shades look a little bit more popping. You know, they really do emphasize the brightness of them and stop them looking sludgy and dingy when we just go in with like pure ash tones. So if you've not got into putting warmth into your cool shades, then definitely try it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and you found the information in this video useful. And if you have, don't forget, thumbs up button always helps the video. Comments also help the video get that algorithm sending it out to the rest of the world so people can also enjoy the video and learn from the content, hopefully. And until next time, please look after yourself in these uncertain times, and I will see you again very soon.